Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and we're going to be talking about Putin today. We're going to go over that, what's going on with the missiles firing from Ukraine into Russia, Russia's response with this, sort of tactic by NATO. I'll give you my perspective on it. I'd also like to do another video, if I can, about what's been going on with COVID and in the United States and the lingering effects of this new wave that's happening. So let's start with product placement. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my work by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member on my Patreon channel. All the links are in the description of this video. So just click the link to the Patreon link and you can subscribe. If you're a paid member at a higher tier level, you'll be able to get access to my lectures on, or parts of my lectures on pulmonology and immunology. That way you get an added benefit for being a higher tiered member on Patreon. But you can also donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my website on the homepage at the very bottom. That way you're supporting my work. I have thousands of videos for free. So this is a way that you can help support for me to do these videos. In addition, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. I have some ebooks, I have supplements, I have lecture series. The lecture series are in immunology and pulmonology. You get a lot of information for only $50. You also can buy the supplements. I have lots of different supplements. I have supplements like the structural nanosilver liquid. This is good. This is important, especially during the cold season, where you take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle, swallow. It'll neutralize pathogens and maintain that mucosal barrier in your oral cavity. This is a great product. It's a structural nanosilver. It's 35 parts per million. You can also get the Max 35 and the Max 14, which also is the Max 35 is 35 parts per million, and the Max 14 is 14 parts per million. So please go to the store and get the great structural nanosilver liquids that I have. I also have lozenges. We're in the cold season, all right, and that means that you have to fight against all these different viruses and influenza and SARS-CoV-2 and RSV, adenoviruses, all these different viruses that you can be exposed to during the cold season. It's important to neutralize those pathogens the moment that they get into your system. The longer you let it fester, the chances of a more serious infection increases. So take structural nanosilver lozenges and drops to neutralize that irritant. It'll neutralize the pathogen. It'll maintain the mucosal barrier and try to mitigate that infection. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the elderberry zinc. It's a great lozenges. The moment you get that irritation in your throat, take the lozenges. Get a couple bags of these. I also have it in Manuka honey in a 21 count lozenges. And I also have drops that are smaller in 3 different flavors. I have it in honey and lemon, blueberry, and also cherry. The cherry is the cherry, blueberry, and Manuka honey drops are in 100 count. So once you have that irritation in your throat, start taking them, and you'll help to neutralize the pathogen or the antigen, the irritant, and maintain that mucosal barrier and reduce the chances of further infection. That's really important. If you catch it early, you'll navigate yourself through the cold season much better. Don't let it fester. So get a couple bags for your household, so when you need them, you're prepared. All right. With the structural nanosilver liquid, you can take this every day. Just take a teaspoon a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. It's just swish in your mouth, gargle, swallow. All right. This is true with also the Max 14 and Max 35. So with that said, let's go to what's going on with Putin here.
You need your team, but she's lost in emails.
I gotta change the speaker here. All right.
Use them for hours every day, but not 10. With Grammarly's AI, she can spend half as much time on emails. Grammarly works for the whole enterprise.
Discover Voting and Progressive present the top safe voting tips. While we all may enjoy a little adventure now and then,
a lot of Russian experts and more amount of them saying that Russia will have to use tactical nuclear weaponry.
So Sergei Markov is a Russian political scientist and a close advisor to Vladimir Putin, and he joins us now. Hello.
Hello.
Russia attacked Ukraine, so why should they be upset if Ukraine fights back with all the weapons at its disposal?
It's very easy. First of all, the main reason why Russia attacked Ukraine is to liberate Ukrainian people from clear terroristic, Russophobic and neo-Nazi regime. It's first.
Yeah, well, it's not liberating it, is it? It's bombarding it.
They're exactly liberating them. And your government is lying to your government to lie. But okay, we'll go ahead and answer. Before this, during these 2 years, Ukrainian army strike Russian army. It's bad things, but it's reasonable. But mostly important that now you want to bomb Russian cities by your rocket missiles and by your satellite group. So you want to target your rocket missiles to the Russian cities to kill our people. Your Great Britain is going to do it. And you think that we will keep silent? Because Ukrainian army has no own satellite group. So it's exactly you are who are going to target these rocket missiles to Russian cities. And Russia,
hang on. Russia is getting weapons from Iran. Russia is getting weapons from China,
yes,
which it is targeting at Ukraine and killing Ukrainian citizens.
No,
Ukrainian civilians. So why can't Ukraine retaliate?
Yeah, the difference is very simple. If Russia gets some rocket missiles, which by the way Iran deny, but nevertheless, let's imagine that Russia gets some rocket missiles from North Korea and from Iran, but we're targeting to our target ourselves. But Ukrainian army has no satellite group, and that's why it's your Americans and British going to target those rocket missiles to Russian cities. Is directed only to war. You want to have war? Go ahead.
Well, what would war mean? Does that mean you expect if this attack on Russian territory with the assistance, clearly there is assistance from...
Not assistance, not assistance.
Yeah.
If Ukrainian assist you, if Ukrainian assist you, and those Ukrainians which you make your proxy army, because most of the Ukrainians doesn't want to fight, as you may know.
President Putin says that it's effectively a declaration of war. I'm just asking how we would respond, because should we expect that there will be attacks on British territory, for example?
Finally, yes. Finally, of course, it will be attack against British territory, but from the beginning, but it depends also on the Great Britain. But from the beginning, I think the embassy, British embassy will be closed, then Russian embassy will be closed in Britain, then some of the British drones and military aviation would be crashed down. And also because these British missiles will be used from Ep60, but Ep60 based not in Ukraine. They based on the Romania and Poland airfield. possibly Russian army will have to give a real strike to those F-16, which is on the Romania and Poland airfields.
And do you see any chance of the use of tactical?
What is getting scary here is that the Western powers are escalating this to the point where there's higher potentiality of Russia targeting NATO countries, which would then set off Article 5 and all this stuff. So I don't see that there is a desire on the Western, on at least the NATO side, including the United States, to de-escalate this. It almost seems like it's escalatory. So we need to really well, wait a minute here, what's really going on? Ukraine can't really do this offensive in the Russian territory without the help of the United States intelligence. And also, it's military targeting and all that. And also it can't do it without the weaponry from NATO. I think they're called ATACMS and shadows. Military equipment from the UK, and then military equipment from the United States. ATACMS are from the United States, and I think their system is called Shadow or Shadows. This is escalatory. All right. So, like the Russian guy said, Ukraine doesn't have targeting capability at this level. It's like satellite targeting capability. The United States does. The UK does. So they're feeding this to the Ukrainians for them to push the button. So it's definitely, obviously, Ukraine is not really fighting for itself. It's becoming a proxy war between NATO forces, the NATO alliance, and Russia. But this is this is escalating to a point where it's maybe pushing Russia to the brink of striking Poland, maybe, or some other of the countries in that region that are part of NATO. I just find this as escalatory, and it moves our focus away from Asia, and just and now we're focused on Europe. I'm concerned about that. I think that the real ball to focus on, the real focus should be the Asian theater, not the European theater. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the applicator set that I have. You can use it with the structural nano silver liquids. All right, you just put the liquid in the nasal spray, the dropper, or the spritzer. It's a great way to carry it in your bag. Obviously, you use the nasal spray to spray the liquid in your nostrils. The dropper, you can drop it in your throat, or you can also spray surfaces with the spritzer, or spray it in the back of your throat. Because not only will this neutralize pathogens in your oral cavity, right? But it's also going to neutralize pathogens that are on surfaces. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the applicator set. I also have a great product. It's the structural nano silver toothpaste. It's a very high quality toothpaste. It has no fluoride in it. This toothpaste, because it has the structural nano silver, will neutralize pathogens. It will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce gum irritation, improve your gum line when you improve your oral hygiene. And in addition, by having good oral hygiene, you're going to improve your cardiovascular system. A lot of people don't realize that as you get older, poor oral hygiene will cause cardiovascular inflammation, plaque buildup. Also, bacteria getting into the bloodstream can cause what is called valvular disease. The valves in your heart may become infected by the pathogens, the bacteria or whatever that gets into your bloodstream through poor oral hygiene. So it's really important to neutralize those. And it's important to maintain good oral hygiene. It's a very high quality product. please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and use the structural nano silver toothpaste every day. Get a couple tubes of this for your household. You're going to need it. Trust me, you're going to need it. So it's a very high quality toothpaste. I use it every day. It's way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Nuclear weapons. Well,
And how are the numbers looking? We're landing at a strong 70. Ooh, SPF.
Thanks to JetBlue's low fares, Kayla's on vacation.
tactical nuclear weapons by Russia.
Yes, of course, because now a lot of Russian experts and more amount of them saying that Russia will have to use tactical nuclear weaponry, specifically against first state possibly against exactly this F-16. Because F-16 is part of the nuclear potential of the NATO countries, and it looks like that this British rocket missiles from American F-16 jet will be a target not only against Russian cities, but also a part of the Russian nuclear defense system. If you will hit, if you strike against Russian nuclear defense system, Russia will have to respond.
What do you say to the British politicians we've been speaking to on the program this morning who say, well, you know, we've heard these threats and saber rattling from President Putin before, and as the support for Ukraine has escalated, actually, there hasn't been any delivery on those threats?
Yes, it's exactly. Vladimir Putin never gave a strong response to escalation. That's why he was very strong criticized inside country that it's mean what it means. It means that Western countries going endless escalation, but Russia don't give any response. And finally, Western politicians, American and British, come to the conclusion: no, Russia has no red line. Just hit Russia, hit it, put Russia on the knees. And now people say, look, no, this should be stopped. Mr. Putin, say them that it will be the last time. We will give response. It's the difference.
You are confirming, or you just confirmed, that North Korea has supplied weapons. Where is Russia getting its weapons from? North Korea, Iran, China, is that correct?
It's very small. It's a top secret. I don't know the details. What I know for sure that 90% of the Ukrainian army weaponry is Western weaponry, and 90% of the Russian weaponry is Russian weaponry. That's why it means that we are taking part in those war, but Ukraine is not the side. We believe that we have hybrid war with NATO and first of all for the United States and its allies as Britain. So from our point of view, you make Ukrainians your slaves and use your slaves in fight in having war against proxy war against us.
The reality, though, is that neither side appears to be winning this war. Russia thought it would be a matter of days, and here we are more than 2 years later. Do you think really that your country is tiring of this war and is ready to negotiate a settlement?
Yes, of course, Russia ready to negotiate. I think that the position for negotiation is still very easily. First of all, democratization of Ukraine. It means all political prisoners in Ukraine, all thousands of political should be liberated, all dozens of political parties which have been prohibited by Vladimir Zelensky should act free, and all hundreds of the media which have been prohibited by Zelensky also could be free. All political refugees should have the right to come back to Ukrainian territory and take part in the political life. It's first democratization, then denazification. When we're talking about denazification, we're talking not only about taking neo-Nazi from Kiev regime, but first of all, stopping system of terror, which is a major political...
That doesn't sound like a peace settlement. That sounds like a victory which Russia's failed to deliver. I just wonder, if, let's assume that there was some territorial exchange, that Russia did take some of the Donetsk provinces, Would it ever be acceptable that the rest of Ukraine could be a sovereign country, a member of NATO, and an applicant to the European Union?
You know, sovereign country and member of NATO is contradiction in itself. Because to be member of NATO, it means to give some big part of its sovereignty to the United States of America. It means that we want Ukraine to be independent country. It's meaning that Ukraine should have not only demilitarization, but denatofication. So all NATO representative should leave Ukraine. And Ukraine could be independent like Switzerland. I think Ukrainians would like to be Switzerland.
Okay, Sergei Markov, thank you very much. And
That's just getting crazy. All right, another Times Radio. I think they do actually a good job bringing up questions, but it's definitely skewed to
Monday.com allows you to
UK.
run any type of operation, even if it's roommate migration, automate workflows, and track progress.
Believes that during the years of this war so far, the Russians have had 600,000 soldiers. If that goes and Kamala Harris wins, then I think President Putin will have some very hard reckoning of his own to do. I mean, the losses are enormous. The UK government believes that during the years of this war so far, the Russians have had 600,000 soldiers killed or wounded. So he's now having to offer that there are adverts in the metro system in Moscow, offering the Russian equivalent of I think it's £47,000 a year, which is a sort of unheard of figure for an unskilled Russian working man to go and fight in Ukraine. And even with those sums of money being offered, they're still having great difficulty refilling the ranks.
Well, let's speak now to Mark Irvin, diplomatic analyst and columnist at the Sunday Times, who suggests we could be heading for the end game of the conflict. Morning, Mark.
Good morning, Chloe.
Brilliant piece you've written in the paper today, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first of all, how significant do you think this intervention is by these 5 former defence secretaries and indeed Boris Johnson?
Well, let's speak plainly. They are 5 former Conservative defence secretaries and a former Conservative Prime Minister. So I think there's a good bit of politics in this. It's interesting to see Boris Johnson saying there's no excuse for a delay, because they should understand that there are some critical issues. Now, you've hinted at it. There are some technical issues, which is that the missile was jointly developed with the French, so they've got to be on side. But also, it needs navigational data that is provided by the Americans. So that's quite a big technical problem. You can't just decide, oh, enough of this, they're dithering too much. We'll just tell the Ukrainians they can get on with it and fire it. You do, in order for the thing to work properly, and as you've suggested, to be able to find its way, for example, around air defences, it doesn't go straight to the target. It takes a route that's designed to bypass the most likely places where it can get shot down. The second issue, of course, is political, and this is so much about politics, this story this morning, which is that obviously it's very hard for Keir Starmer and the British government to go against the expressed wishes of the United States in this matter. Not only do they provide that technical information, but if we decide to do it, having clearly had indications from the Americans that they're not ready to go to this step, then, Britain stands out on its own. Now, of course, to the people that the paper has spoken to, the former Conservative Defence Secretaries and Boris Johnson, that's exactly what they want. They want Britain politically to take a strong stand in support of Volodymyr Zelensky and to do it. But I don't think it's going to happen. Now, it is a fascinating line. Will the Americans change their tune once we've heard what Zelensky calls his plan for victory? Now, that's going to be the week after next. The week after this coming one in New York. So it could be, and it could also be, of course, that permission is quietly given by the Americans after that date, and then we wake up one morning and the Russians say, yes, we've been hit by a storm shadow in such and such a place in Russia. So that's how the story is developing. It's intensely, I think, politically sensitive. And really, when you get down to that, The big question, I think, is that because we have different views about how the conflict should progress or end now, or is it another episode of what supporters of Ukraine, and indeed some of those defence secretaries who've been talked to by the paper this morning, would see as timidity?
Your piece that you've written in the paper today, Are Russia and Ukraine Edging Towards an Endgame, is a really fascinating insight into all of the different things that are at play, not least, which you outlined so well, is the troop shortages and the fatigue potentially on both sides.
Well, that's right. The question now, I think, as we get towards it, traditionally there's a campaigning season. Once it gets much wetter, which it's also already started to do, gets much muddier. So it's harder for armoured vehicles to move without getting bogged down in the mud. Then, of course, it gets much colder. All sorts of implications to that, both on the front line and, of course, for civilian populations, because particularly in Ukraine, the power generation infrastructure, the power stations, the gas storage, all these other things have been hammered during the past year by Russian strikes. Now, what's happened in the last few months is that the Ukrainians have started much more effectively hitting back at the Russian infrastructure. Now, that includes all sorts of targets, military targets, airfields, all of those sorts of things, but it does also include some of their petroleum storage and electricity plants responsible for supplying power to the Russian grid and the Russian economy. Now, I think those things combined, the real problems that the Russians are having finding enough people to fight, because they've taken enormous losses again during the summer, plus the increasingly effective Ukrainian strikes. And of course, that's why the Ukrainians would look.
Your team comes to work, gets started, and disappears into 100 apps, each with their own greedy little text boxes. Except Pam, because Pam.
Of course, that's why the Ukrainians would like to add Storm Shadow and other missiles to that mix to ratchet up the pain even more on the Russians. I think all of those things mean there may be an opportunity a little bit later this year, towards the end of the year, to actually get the Russians to engage seriously for the first time in many, many months about how this might end.
And do you get a sense there is an appetite within Ukraine to negotiate with Russia? And I'm not just talking about the leaders, I'm talking, the population who've had to live with this war and the reality of it for so long now.
It's really hard, Chloe, because, if you talk to people, I quote one or two people in the article, who've lost a brother or a son or a husband, it's incredibly hard for them to see this ending in terms any other than victory, as they would say. Now, what does that mean? That means getting their lands back that have been occupied by the Russians. I think for Zelensky, it's going to be a much more complex judgment than that, a much more difficult judgment. He knows.
See, some people are saying that in the mainstream media, it's saying that Russia has lost a lot, right? But there are some of the alternative media that's saying that Russia has not lost a lot. I think that Russia has lost a lot, and so has the Ukrainians. And that it's getting to a point where it's almost a stalemate, that there's really not, there's not really big movement. Now there is this added calculus where now the longer range missiles using NATO country targeting intelligence, like the UK and the United States, it kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. Now you can reach farther into Russia, and that might tip the balance in favor for Ukraine. Very possible. All right, but the other part of that is it may also tip the Russians to moving against NATO countries. So this is escalatory. So you have two forces, the Ukrainians and the Russians, kind of almost at a stalemate. But then you had a new capability by the Ukrainians to be able to reach farther into Russia with these longer range missiles. The question is will Russia move against NATO countries or not. I mean, there's pluses and minuses to the whole strategy, but we're moving towards this being a multi-country war in Europe, and it could be very problematic for everybody around the world. This is very important to understand here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C that I have. It has magnesium in it. This helps you to boost up your immune system. This is really important to take every day, especially during the cold season, to boost up your immune system. Vitamin C also helps to improve your skin. So many people should be taking vitamin C every day. In addition, if you're not feeling well, take a double dose. Drink it with water. I also have a probiotic. I have this probiotic is in a powder. I take it every day. There's a little scooper in here. You just put it in your food or mix it with water and take it every day. A good gut biome will improve your metabolism. A good gut biome will improve communication between your gut and your liver, and your gut and your brain. By improving that communication, you're going to have better brain health. You're going to be able to think better. You're going to be actually a good gut biome will reduce inflammation. And by reducing inflammation, you're going to help to improve digestion and your immune system. So please go to the store and get the probiotic that I have. I have this in a powdered form, and I also have it in a veggie cap form. Please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, during the cold season, it's really important to take vitamin D3 every day. Why? Because this helps cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. When a cell goes into apoptosis, it can die off, and then the body can clear the infection. Take vitamin D3 also to help to absorb calcium, and it's a great cofactor for gene expression. So for proper gene expression, you're going to need vitamin D3. So there's a multiple purpose vitamin here that you should be taking to improve your bone health, to improve your cardiovascular health, to improve your gene expression, and to help fight infections by getting cells to go into apoptosis, because many pathogens kind of circumvent the cell from going into apoptosis. So you need the vitamin D3 to help get the cell to go into apoptosis. So please go to my store and take vitamin D3. Take it every day. Ashwagandha root, very important to take. It helps to control your blood glucose levels and bring down inflammation. It's synergistic with turmeric, which is a strong antioxidant and brings down inflammation. So these two together will help your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system.
Those lands back by fighting is quite limited. There was this much heralded counteroffensive late last summer, and this summer, although he's tried to kind of change the whole conflict, the nature of the conflict on the ground by this daring incursion into Russia proper, it's not. It doesn't seem either that that's going to make huge strides. I mean, they're not literally marching their way to Moscow right now. It's not possible with the forces that Ukraine has at its disposal to make, you know, a huge difference. So they are stalemated, and they have these very severe problems, for example, with power generation. I mean, the best estimates I've seen say that these Russian strikes by summer this year had cut by 50% the Ukrainian ability to produce power. And, you know, that is going to be a really, really difficult problem this winter, obviously with much colder temperatures. And Zelensky himself has alluded to this. He's alluded to the difficult challenge of the winter ahead. It's one of the reasons why he has got rid of a load of ministers several days ago, and he's trying to reform his cabinet. He knows it's going to be politically hard, and that people, even if they don't overtly say, look, let's just wrap this up, have some kind of ceasefire, it's very hard politically to say that in Ukraine. That even if they don't do that, this issue about people either leaving the country to avoid military service or, for example, deserting once they've got there. The Ukrainian parliament had a fascinating statistic that 19,000 soldiers had been charged with desertion in the first 4 months of this year. That all these issues speak to a nation that is deeply war weary.
Absolutely. And of course, we mustn't forget, and the huge issue here in the background, of course, is the US presidential election, and whoever wins, how that could have a fundamental difference on not only how the war is armed and the support that Ukraine gets, but also the pressure on having negotiations and a ceasefire.
That's absolutely right, Chloe. I mean, there has been, we got a fascinating glimpse. The American paper, the Washington Post, revealed a few weeks ago that there had been an attempt through Qatar, through them acting as mediators, to get Ukraine and Russia to stop targeting one another's energy infrastructure. In other words, to negotiate a sort of ban on those kinds of strikes. And that this had come close to producing an agreement last month. Now, I think that gives an insight into the fact that both countries are really feeling the pain of these deep strikes. Now, does that mean that there's been a more fundamental decision by President Putin to engage in diplomacy? No, I don't think it does. Not yet, but I think it does hint, along with everything else we know, that his position may change. It may have to change after the presidential election, particularly if Kamala Harris wins, at which point any hopes he might have of, Donald Trump just shutting down the supply of weapons to Ukraine, something like that, a really big sort of event that would change the dynamic. If that goes and Kamala Harris wins, then I think President Putin will have some very hard reckoning of his own to do. I mean, the losses are enormous. The UK government believes that during the years of this war so far, the Russians have had 600,000 soldiers killed or wounded. So he's now having to offer that there are adverts in the metro system in Moscow offering the Russian equivalent of I think it's £47,000 a year, which is a sort of unheard of figure for an unskilled Russian working man to go and fight in Ukraine. And even with those sums of money being offered, they're still having great difficulty refilling the ranks.
Gosh, Mark, it's absolutely fascinating. Thank you for your time. We must speak again.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Al Jazeera about this topic with Putin. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's important to detoxify your body. You can detoxify your body by taking the zeolite that I have on my store. It removes heavy metals, chemicals, and toxins from your body. How it works is this zeolite is a negatively charged molecule, and it will attach to positively charged heavy metals, positively charged chemicals and toxins, and bind to them and allow you to urinate that out in 6 to 8 hours. So you just take a few drops underneath your tongue and do this every day, right? And you're detoxifying your body. It's really important because the foods that you eat have chemicals in them that are bad for you. There's these chemicals called forever chemicals. They're PFAS and PFAS chemicals. There are heavy metals, there's pesticides, there's lots of bad ingredients in these processed foods. So if you're ingesting this, you're through water or through food or through the air you breathe, it can build up in your cells and cause problems, endocrine disruption issues, weaken your immune system. So it's really important to detoxify your body from these toxins. So take zeolite to detoxify do the detoxification of your body. It's just you take a few drops underneath your tongue, you drink some water, and do that on a regular basis, and you're detoxifying your body. If you're on medication, you should talk to your doctor before you take zeolite, because zeolite might bind to your medication and make it less effective for you. So they may have to boost up your medication if you are going to be taking zeolite while you're taking medication. So talk to your doctor before you use zeolite if you're on medication. Zeolite is a great product. It will soak up those toxins. We have to worry about chemtrails. Chemtrails are real, right? They are doing geoengineering, and these chemicals get onto the surface of our homes and of our backyards and on the land that grows food, and we'll get into the food supply. All right. So it's really important to try to mitigate it by detoxifying it out of your body. Another way is stop eating the processed foods and make sure you filter your water. If you filter your water and stop eating processed foods, you're reducing your intake of these chemicals and these toxins. But it's not perfect, and you may be breathing in certain types of chemicals and toxins. So it's important to detoxify your body on a regular basis. We are polluting the planet, unfortunately, and it affects our endocrine system, and it affects our immune system. People that are on more processed foods and don't filter their water, you'll notice that they seem to have endocrine problems. Maybe they have insulin resistance issues, or what they call metabolic syndrome, metabolic diseases and all this stuff. So it's important to detoxify your body. I also have other products like NAC that help to detoxify your body too. But detoxifying your body is important. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take Zeolite. The Zeolite that I have on my store, you can take every day throughout the year. So just keep that in mind. In addition, clarity factor, really important to maintain concentration, get rid of that brain fog, keep those dendrites connections good and strong, because what that will allow you to do is to think quicker, to have better memory, and not just memory and thinking quicker, but when you have better neural health, you'll have better balance, you'll have better control of your muscles, you'll have better coordination, you have better gait, you'll be able to walk better. So it's really important to maintain neural health, and you can do that with many of the products that I have. Clarity Factor is one product that not just helps you concentrate, but keeping those dendritic connections powerful and getting those neuron transmitters shooting off, you're maintaining your neural network, and that's really important for maintaining your mental acuity, right? So please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. It's a very high quality product, and it's synergistic. It's synergistic with ubiquinol and NAD+ and NAC and C60, right? And when you do that, when you're improving the connections and mitochondrial health and the neurotransmitters and the ATP, when you do all that, then you're really maintaining that neural health to slow down that aging process neurologically. So please go to my store and get the Clarity Factor. Good night formula, really important, especially if you're having problems sleeping. A lot of people are having problems sleeping on a regular basis, and you need regular sleep for consolidation of memory, to detoxify your body, and to have that deep, well-restedness when you wake up. You need about 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep to be able to do that, and you need it regularly. One of the big pillars for improving aging and longevity is to actually sleep more, right? Not too much sleep, but make sure that you have proper sleep. And it's about 7 to 8 hours a day, all right? And when you do that, you're detoxifying your body and you're letting the body heal. Most of the healing that's taking place on the body is actually when you're sleeping, all right? So, and detoxification of the body. Well, if you're up all night, then your cortisol levels are increased, your glucose levels are higher, you're more inflamed, you're not consolidating memory, and you're speeding up the aging process, right? So it's really important to get regular sleep. So if you're having problems sleeping, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night formula. It has tryptophan and melatonin in it. It's a great product. Go take this, get the well-rested sleep, and you'll start noticing over a period of time that your body is starting to detox and your body is starting to heal. You're having more energy because you're well rested, and it's one of the major pillars for anti-aging. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Good Night formula, and by having proper good sleep, you're going to improve your immune system in the process.
would mean all-out war with NATO members. But how serious is its warning, and what difference could these weapons make on the battlefield? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. The war in Ukraine is at a critical juncture. Western allies are considering a shift in their support, allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles against targets deep inside Russian territory. Ukraine has been pleading for the go-ahead for months, but there's no indication when or if the US President Joe Biden will grant the request. The Kremlin has warned such approval would mean NATO members were directly involved in the conflict. Will Western nations cross President Vladimir Putin's red line? And if they do, how will Russia respond? We'll discuss these questions and many more with our guests in a moment. But first, this report from Axel Zamovich.
In Washington, a summit that could reshape the battlefield in Ukraine. US President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer are weighing up a critical decision. Should Ukraine be allowed to use Western-made missiles to hit targets deep inside Russia? The weapons in question include the British-French manufactured Storm Shadow. They have a range of 250 kilometers and fly close to the speed of sound. And the American-made Army Tactical Missile Systems, known as ATACMS. They have a range of 300 kilometers and carry 225 kilograms of explosives. Both could reach far beyond the front lines and strike Russian military sites.
Google Cloud AI knows a 98-mile-per-hour heater with a 13-inch drop means a 24.7% chance the home team gets a strikeout.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has long called for these weapons, saying they're crucial to Ukraine's defenses. Until recently, Western nations have been reluctant to give the go-ahead, fearing an escalation in the conflict. But they're reconsidering in light of reports that Iran is supplying Russia with ballistic missiles. President Vladimir Putin says the use of Western-made long-range weapons in the war would be crossing a red line.
It will mean nothing less than the direct participation of NATO, the US, and European countries in the war in Ukraine. Their direct participation significantly changes the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean NATO, the US, and European countries are fighting Russia.
It's not the first time he's issued such warnings. Since the war began in February 2022, the West has steadily increased military aid to Ukraine, testing Moscow's resolve.
This war of attrition has reached
The problem that I have with Zelensky, many problems I have with Zelensky, but every time he is on the international stage, all right, he's at the UN or doing some sort of, meeting, very rarely is he in a suit. I have seen him in a suit once in a while, but usually he's in a t-shirt or, some sort of, some military outfit, that looks a little relaxed. I don't find that professional at all. And what is interesting is that if you just step back and forget about the war in Ukraine, and with Russia, right? But just look at how startups, especially from California, these founders for startups, how do they look? They're very relaxed and they have, t-shirt, maybe a polo, but it's, very relaxed look. They almost never have a tie and a suit on or anything like that. They don't have a preppy look, or they don't have a professional look, a business attire look. They have a kind of relaxed coder look, right? And I don't find that authentic. It almost is as if to try to convince investors that you're working hard and you're a startup and you're scraping by, that you have to have that look. I think it's better that if you are approaching for for investors to invest in a company, it's better to have the professional attire. All right, the more the better. Not even smart casual, I think, is too gown dressed. But the way that Zelensky is dressing these days, it's like as if he's like some sort of startup for a country. You know, it's just it doesn't look authentic. All right, it looks contrived. I think it would be better if he looked like he was a diplomat, looked like he was a leader of the country. But what it's almost like he's like some sort of startup, and the investors for the startup of Ukraine are the allied nations of NATO. But it just that piece of him really bugs me. He doesn't look like an authentic person, even though they're trying to make him to seem authentic by down dressing. No, I think he should updress for the occasion. And if the diplomats, if the heads of state are dressing in a suit and tie, you know, stop looking like a clown, Zelensky.
Very critical stage in which now the Ukrainian front lines are beginning to collapse. So the dilemma for NATO is, does it negotiate?
All right. University of Southeastern Norway. All right. He's on Al Jazeera. He's speaking through Zoom or technology like Zoom. All right. He's maybe in his own flat, all right, in Norway, or maybe he's, you know, at the university at his office. I don't know. But the thing is that he's well dressed. He's showing professionalism on Al Jazeera about a serious topic. Don't you think that Zelensky should be speaking at the UN with a suit and tie and not, you know, some sort of, you know, woke fatigue outfit? He's just so, I mean, I'll tell you, it's like almost everything is theater these days. I'm gonna go to commercial. Help support my work and PNN, because you don't want to watch CNN. And go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. Resveratrol is synergistic with some of the other antioxidants that I offer. This will help to get rid of senescent cells. And because it is a great antioxidant, it'll help to slow down the aging process. It is synergistic, and you stack it with things like C60 and NAD plus and NAC and ubiquinol. Very important, all right? It's about stacking. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. I take this every day with my stack, and that's with ubiquinol, NAC, NAD plus, C60, okay? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The reason why you want to stack is to get the higher energy levels and those antioxidants at different vector points. All right, the C60 soaks it up with the C60 molecule. Resveratrol is an antioxidant, which is a different type of molecule. Vitamin C is a different type of molecule. Ubiquinol is a different type of molecule. NAC uses glutathione. NAD plus, you know, boosts up energy. So, you know, by doing that, by attacking and boosting up energies and improving the mitochondrial health and bringing down those reactive oxygen species in the cell, you're really supercharging the cell and giving it all the ingredients it needs, like it was when it was young, to be able to perform the best that it can perform. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol.
Or escalate to keep the war going, and it seems as if some are pushing for negotiations while others are pushing for escalation. So this is why the United States is a bit cautious, because it should be, because if they escalate this war too much, they might not be able to negotiate anymore, and also it's the loss of unintended consequences, as at some point Russia will retaliate.
A response by Russia could be severe. Putin has threatened to upgrade air defenses, destroy incoming missiles, and even arm Western adversaries abroad, such as Iran and North Korea. There's also talk of revising Russia's nuclear policy. Despite all this, President Biden seems unwilling to cross Putin's latest red line, at least for now. Axel Zamovich, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Well, let's discuss all of this further with today's panel of guests who are joining us. From Moscow, we're joined by Pavel Felgenhauer. He's an independent Russian defense analyst. From Munich, Marina Miron is postdoctoral researcher at the War Studies Department, King's College London. And from Washington, D.C., Lawrence Korb, former Assistant Secretary of Defense. Thank you for joining us today on Inside Story. Marina, let me start with you before we get into what has been going on in the diplomacy this week, taking place in Ukraine and in Washington, and before we find out what was said in Moscow. Let's just go back to basics. What is it that Ukraine actually wants at the moment? They have these long-range missiles, as I understand it. They need permission to use them in a different way.
Correct. So what Ukraine is essentially asking for is the Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles that it already has at its disposal to be used on Russian territory to strike deep into Russia. And of course, it also has American ATACMS, which have a range of 300 kilometers, so they can reach even farther. So those would be in question as well. And Ukraine arguments it as self-defense, saying that it could hit military targets and degrade Russia's capability to wage war against Ukraine.
And just to follow up on that, Marina, just to be absolutely clear, I don't want to go into all the details of the military capabilities of these missiles, but the Storm Shadow and the Scalp, the Storm Shadow is a UK missile. The Scalp, I'm right in saying, is almost identical, but a French variant of the same missile. And the other one, which is the Army Tactical Missile System, which is known by this acronym ATACMS, that's a US missile. What is the range of these?
So that is correct. So the range for air-launched Storm Shadow missiles is 250 kilometers, and for the American ATACMS is 300 kilometers.
Lawrence, your take on Ukraine wanting these missiles. As I understand it, they've submitted to both the US and the UK a potential list of targets.
That's correct. Basically, they are prohibited from using these weapons that my colleague has just talked about, the Storm Shadow and ATACMS, to attack targets deep into Russia. And their range is a couple hundred miles, because if they can attack those, it'll make it more difficult for Russia to continue to bomb in Ukraine. We have been very careful about not letting them do that, because we are basically up to now been concerned that Putin would take this as an excuse to possibly even use nuclear weapons against Ukraine.
Marina, you are there in Munich, but you work for the War Studies Department of King's College London, so you understand the UK position. I think it's worth focusing for a little bit before we find out what has happened in the last few days on the UK position. The UK
think about
seems
this.
to
Think about this. Russia invade. It doesn't matter what perspective you have, either the Ukrainian perspective or the Russian perspective. But let's just say Russia takes territory that Ukraine thought is theirs. All right. And there's a battle. There's a war between Ukraine and Russia on these territories. So there's a territorial dispute, and Russia seemed like it was winning, and then they started to retreat. There's proof positive that NATO countries were supplying weapons and information for Ukraine to fight Russia. All right. Now it's sending military equipment to be used to fight in Russia. sending sending military equipment to Ukraine to fight in Russia. Now, there's two parts to this. Ukraine took some territory from Russia in the Kursk region, and so they have moved in, and now they are using weapons like drones and missiles to hit certain facilities using US, or let's just say NATO equipment to fight in Russia territory, either shooting it over the border or actually having equipment used to move into Russia. All right. So Russia looks at this and goes, okay, the NATO is giving equipment to Ukraine because Russia is fighting a war with Ukraine, and is telling them, oh, because you are, and Russia's telling Ukraine, well, if you shoot into the border, then perhaps this creates a problem where Russia needs to now fight NATO and its countries, all right? Because it seems as though it's NATO plus Ukraine against Russia from the Russian perspective. So why doesn't Russia actually hit the countries that are providing these longer range missiles? Because they're escalating the issue. I think this is part of the calculus that the Russians are thinking, right? Now the NATO alliance is going, Russia's weak, and maybe there are at least NATO's thinking Russia's weak, and they're thinking, okay, maybe this is the time to really push out Putin. So, but there's a problem here, and it says this could really escalate. It's a real problem, and when you balance what's going on in Asia and when you balance what's going on in the Middle East, I'm not sure if this is the best option path to go down.
Is he keen to let Ukraine use its Storm Shadow missiles in a new way? Is that your understanding? And is this a rare moment of slight disagreement between these two allies, the UK and the US, in recent weeks?
Yes, that is correct. At least as far as the top of the government is concerned, that is a UK position. UK wants to permit Ukraine to use those Storm Shadow missiles and Scalp missiles to attack Russian targets. Now, the problem is that the navigational data for these missiles is American. Therefore, Great Britain needs the American permission. That being said, it doesn't mean that the opinion within the UK is uniform. As one former UK diplomat said, we should not discount the fact that Putin has not acted yet on his red lines, that it's going to continue that way.
And Lawrence, if we look at the NATO countries, 32 nations in NATO, I think it's fair to say, is it not, that the UK is one of the most hawkish countries, along perhaps with Poland and the Baltic nations, which all are geographically close to Russia. And of course, the Baltic nations were once part of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, there's no doubt about the fact that the UK is probably after the United States, the most significant military power in NATO. And don't forget, the United Kingdom, along with France, they have nuclear weapons. I think people forget that because they're focusing only on the United States nuclear weapons. And basically, I think what the British are trying to do quite correctly is present a united front against Putin. And by getting American permission, even if the United States does not at this time allow ATACMS, it basically sends a signal to Putin that the Western alliance is united against him, particularly upset at him for recently getting missiles from Iran and North Korea, and continuing to get components from China.
Okay, bringing Pavel in from Moscow now, on specifically the UK, if you look at the NATO countries, is it right in saying, my impression is that of all the NATO countries, the UK is the one that riles Moscow more than the others? And we also had the recent news that, I think it happened some time ago, but the announcement that 6 UK diplomats had been expelled from Moscow.
Yes, the relationship between Moscow and London is very low key. Britain has been seen as an adversary very much in Moscow, as during the Cold War. I would not say that Britain is seen as the most unfriendly in NATO. There's, of course, the Baltic states. There's Poland that has kind of seen as in Russia as being as aggressive as Britain, but of the big nuclear kind of powers, yes, most likely it is seen as the worst, and things are not getting better because, well, now Britain seems to be pressing along to allow Ukraine to use precision-guided Western long-range weapons on Russian territory, not only in Crimea, but in other places too.
Okay, so let's now move to the diplomacy that took place this week, Marina. We had the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken going to London, meeting his UK counterpart, the new Foreign Secretary David Lammy, also meeting the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Then Mr. Lammy and Mr. Blinken went to go and see President Zelensky in Ukraine, and it seemed like there was sort of choreography here. It seemed like they were edging towards something because the UK Prime Minister then was due in Washington and was in Washington at the end of the week. It looked like they were going to make an announcement. And let me just read to you the New York Times headline on Thursday: Biden poised to approve Ukraine's use of long-range Western weapons in Russia. Everyone thought it was going to happen, didn't they?
Absolutely, everybody was thinking that this is going to take place. However, I think getting that coalition formed and getting an agreement, given the fact that the United States also understands the risks, being a country pre-election now, is problematic. And so what Britain is trying to do essentially is what we have seen with the Challengers, with the tanks, when Britain was the country to open the floodgates for others to supply Ukraine with tanks, because sending 14 Challenger tanks to Ukraine didn't substantially change the situation, but it was a very significant political move. And so we're seeing a repetition of that here. The problem is that the circumstances have changed. The battlefield configuration looks different. And of course, the US politics play a lot into this, as well as the British domestic politics, as we have seen the political turbulence in the past years. So that's problematic. And of course, if we remember how France was trying to create that same coalition by suggesting that NATO might be willing to send boots on the ground, or at least France would be the first country to send boots on the ground in Ukraine, and how that didn't work out. And so there is a different strategy now. So let's try with the long-range weapons and see if that's a lower bar in terms of risk.
But one other thing happened, didn't it, Pavel, between that New York Times headline saying Biden was poised to approve this and the meeting that took place in the Oval Office between the UK Prime Minister and President Biden, and that was the intervention by President Putin, coming out and saying that if they did this, it would mean that NATO countries were at war with Russia. How significant, Pavel, do you think the words were of Putin? Because we have had bellicose statements from him before.
Well, from Putin, maybe not. His subordinates, yes. The former president and now Deputy Secretary of Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, was talking about this all going into nuclear warfare, maybe, or war in general. But now it was Putin. Putin is playing the honored and very effective card used during the Cold War by both sides. It's called brinkmanship, a term coined by John Foster Dulles in the 50s, means balancing on the brink of nuclear war. One side threatens that it may go nuclear, demanding the other back down. And it works. It works time and again. It works again. So the United States presidential election, Donald Trump has been all the time talking about that if he's not elected, there's going to be a third world war. And this has an effect on the decision making in Washington. They're holding back. It worked in general during this conflict many times. And so I guess that's basically for what nuclear weapons were used mostly during the Cold War, for brinkmanship. And now it's working again. Putin said that we'll go to war, but that really does not mean we'll go to war, but that is a very serious threat that will make the other side do something or make some concessions.
Okay, well, let's discuss in a moment whether we think Putin really means it and what he could do. But Marina, just to be...
I'll tell you, we are moving closer and closer with a much broader conflict in Europe. As this whole long-range missile thing. See, if the let's say the United States is controlling the whole thing and with the NATO, which most likely it is. All right. They're thinking this is the time to take out Putin. He's the weakest. It's time to use the proxy war in Ukraine and give them more capability, longer range capability into Russia proper. All right. And either Putin gets assassinated, overthrown, surrenders, whatever. All right. The problem comes in is that throughout history, Russia in the winter seems to push back its aggressors. All right. That's historical. So history is on Putin's side. Now, if the numbers that are being published in the mainstream media are true, Russia has problems with its military capability. It's lost men, it has munition issues, it has military hardware issues and all this stuff, all right? It's depleted. So political capital and military capital, Putin seems to have expended. So he's run, if the mainstream media announcements are true, then he doesn't have a whole lot of capacity to wage war, right? But by attacking Russia proper, it does galvanize the domestic Russian citizen to push back against NATO, or at the very least against Ukraine. So by attacking Russia may actually strengthen Putin domestically. So this is just playing with fire. We don't know really what's going on. And, you know, how would we feel if Russia started providing tactical capability, military capability against our adversaries, you know, against, I'm sorry, tactical capability against the United States with our adversaries, all right? And they start launching missiles, long-range missiles, you know, on U.S. bases. For example, what if, let's say, they start providing tactical information to Hezbollah with long-range missile capability. So they give them long-range missiles, they give them the intelligence to use them to attack strike groups that are in the Mediterranean against the U.S. naval strike groups, right? So this could start really getting out of control and escalate into a world war. This is what I'm saying. We have to be really careful here. Really, really careful. Maybe that's the reason why maybe the White House is a little trepid with this whole issue. I don't know. But we got to worry about this. I mean, we are either in World War III or we're about to go into World War III. Really, it's a real big problem. Let me do a commercial here. Please take my advice and boost up your immune system. We're going into the cold season. We're going to be needing to have a strong immune system to fight different types of pathogens like RSV, SARS-CoV-2, adenoviruses, mpox, right? Influenzas. So you need to boost up your immune system. A great way to boost up your immune system is to take lignans. Lignans is a powder. You take it every day. You mix it with your food or with water. And this will help to boost up your immune system. By taking lignans every day, you're also improving your endocrine system. This is so by improving your endocrine system, your hormonal system, your immune system, you're going to be able to have a more robust defense mechanism during the cold season. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take lignans every day to help boost up your immune system. It's for males and females. It'll help to improve your hormonal health. Because a lot of people don't realize that because of the toxins that we breathe and ingest, through water and foods that we eat, that it affects our endocrine system. That endocrine system gets affected, so our hormonal balance gets disrupted and our immune system gets disrupted. We need to go back and get it reset. So it's really important to take these types of supplements that I offer at my store to reset your endocrine system and to reset and improve your immune system. When you do that, you're going to start noticing that you don't get as sick as often, and you start to age slower. So it's added benefits. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. I also have olive leaf extract, which is a dual product. It's great because it helps to improve your immune system by bringing down inflammation, and it helps with your cardiovascular system by bringing down inflammation in your vessels, and it also brings down the LDL and increases your HDL levels. So by taking this, you're improving your cardiovascular system because you're improving your lipid profile, you're improving your cholesterol. And when you have less LDL, you have less plaque buildup, because plaque buildup is based on oxidizing LDL. If that LDL gets into your vascular vessel, the inner lining of your vessel, if that LDL gets there and gets oxidized, then what happens is it gets eaten up by macrophages, and the macrophages turns into foam cells, and the foam cells turn into plaque. So if you have less LDL, you have less plaque buildup. All right. If you have less inflammation in your vascular system, you have less cracks or tears in the intima to allow for the LDL to get in. So it's really important to take olive leaf extract every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and improve your immune system and improve your cardiovascular system. Really important.
To us, if he did mean it, if he said that this was now a war between Russia and the 32 NATO members. I mean, under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, when one NATO member is attacked, then it's known as the All for One article. That's considered an act of all 32. So just to go down that route for a moment for me, that hypothetical route, that would mean NATO versus Russia in a war. That would effectively mean World War III, would it not?
Well, perhaps yes, because of the collective self-defense. That being said, it depends on where it starts and how. And NATO has been projecting the possible Russian invasion in the Baltics, which is an interesting scenario. The problem with the scenario is, even if that were to happen, as it stands right now, NATO itself admits that it lacks readiness when it comes to an armed conflict or an armed conflict with Russia. Certainly, we don't know in what shape this would take place, but yes, essentially, that would lead to a Third World War. And we have to remember the unchanged Russian nuclear doctrine. If Russia feels that its state survival is at stake, that is clearly written. They reserve the right to use all means, including nuclear weapons. So I think that also increases the possibilities that Russia might indeed use nuclear weapons.
Okay, Lawrence, what's your view? Do you think that President Putin means it, or is it just brinkmanship? I mean, you served as the Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. What would Reagan say? Would he say call Putin's bluff?
I think he would, based on where we are now, because Russia is in a relatively weak position when it comes to this war. Don't forget, they have had 600,000 troops either killed or wounded. And basically, if you allow these deeper attacks into Russia, I think this would have an impact on Russian public opinion about this war. Because if you listen to what they're saying in Russia, basically they're telling the Russian Putin and his people are telling the Russian people everything's going well, we're winning the war, we have, minimum casualties, we don't need to send draftees there yet. But I think
that he's being too optimistic, because one, when the winter comes, it may be in the benefit of Russia. If Russia does an assault on Ukraine, right? Historically, during the winter, Russia, when being invaded, Russia usually wins, right? Or at least can defend its territory. So you have history on Russia's side. I think it is optimistic to think that the domestic audience in Russia would be against Putin when they see destruction of Russia's cities, towns, buildings. I think it'll galvanize the Russians and side with Putin for further defense of Russia against NATO through the proxy war with Ukraine. So I think that this idea that, now, of course, it could happen that maybe the domestic audience in Russia will want to overthrow or have Putin stop the war or whatever. All right, that's possible. But I have a feeling through history that the Russian people will actually galvanize against the NATO alliance. Because this is starting to more look, as time goes on, more and more like a NATO war with Russia. All right. So if they have Article 5, where if Russia attacks a particular country, and then Article 5 gets activated and all the countries within NATO are in defense of that one country against Russia. All right. Well, why doesn't Russia say a war that is a proxy war, and you're giving NATO forces are giving intelligence that are coming from the US or from the French or from UK that are targets within Russia? That's an act of war against Russia by the country that's giving the data, either UK, France, or the United States. And this proxy war it could get out of control really quick. Them attacking Russia proper, I think, could be a miscalculation. It's a risk. I mean, this may be the fall of Putin, or it may actually bolster up Putin domestically. We don't know. Historically, in the winter, Russia does pretty well.
These attacks come deep inside Russia, then the Russian people would say, wait a second, what's going on? So it's hard to calculate what Putin is talking about. I guess you want to err on the side of caution. But the fact of the matter is, I think in this particular case, it's probably time to call Putin's bluff. And Biden has tremendous support in the Congress. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who's a Democrat from New Hampshire, Mitch McConnell, the Republican minority leader in the Senate, they're both saying no. Use the ATACMS to go deeper into Russia, so this war will not drag on, forever. Now, the other complicating factor is Biden only has a couple months left in office. And if Trump gets in, we completely change our whole strategy toward Ukraine based upon what he has said so far.
So, Pavel, you heard there from Lawrence. He says the US should call Putin's bluff. How do you see that in Moscow? And do you think the situation is the same as at other key decision points for the West in this war? Because, of course, it comes nearly 6 weeks after that Kursk incursion, that daring Ukrainian incursion, seizing 1,300 square kilometers of Russian territory, which they're still holding. Does that change things and change the calculations?
The secret to the perfect bread? Add moisture. The new Miele ovens.
Building Ukrainian tactical success and course is important, but Russia has done tactical successes during the summer in the Donbass. So Russia was advancing in one place, so the Ukrainians broke through in another. All in all, in summary, it's still a bloody quagmire on the front line. Neither side has been capable of translating its tactical successes into anything strategic. And there's increasingly developing something I would call like the war of the cities during the Iraq-Iran war in the 80s, when there was also a bloody quagmire on the front line, and both sides were hitting deep into their own territory of the other side. Because Ukraine has been hitting deep into Russia using its own drones, long range, which it has now is mass producing. There were attacks in Moscow. Just recently there was an attack and a fire was ignited at the oil refinery in the outskirts of the city. And of course, if Ukrainians were allowed to use the Western precision-guided weapons to add up to their own long-range drones, that would be dangerous. And actually, the Storm Shadow or Scalp, according to Russian sources, has a range of over 500 kilometers and could basically hit Moscow. And these are really, though the Storm Shadow is it's subsonic, but it can be shot down, but it's very precise. That would be seen as a very serious development because basically it could also threaten Putin's own residence or the Russian high staffs in Moscow. So how Russia will react? I'm not saying that Russia is ready to go over the nuclear threshold. The nuclear threshold is very high, and Russia does not have a nuclear monopoly. If you go over the threshold, the other side might go too. That's very dangerous, but the situation could get much more serious if it escalates into a war of the cities where between Russia and Ukraine, where the Western long-range weapons will be also involved.
So, Lawrence, where do you think things stand right now at the moment with the US position? Because no decision was made, despite us all expecting one, at that meeting in the Oval Office. We're now told from Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, that he wants to have another meeting with allies, including President Biden, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, which is just over a week's time. So do you think Biden blinked here? Was he spooked by Putin's warnings, or do you think this is going to be revisited and eventually that Ukraine is going to be given this permission to strike much deeper into Russia?
Because it wasn't given today, Blinken blinked. And I think the Biden administration is concerned about further a much more wider conflict in Europe. Now, if they keep on attacking, let's say Moscow, right, let's say Ukrainians are hitting Moscow, all right, with these long-range missiles. What's wrong with Putin hitting cities like Berlin or London or Paris, or even, let's say, Washington, D.C.? Not nuclear, but just long-range missiles. Just to, show the Western alliance what it's like to be attacked. Because the Western alliance is used to not being attacked. Western alliance has had kind of like this hiatus of war, and they've only done, proxy wars. And this Ukrainian war is really like Vietnam in Europe, right? But now it's getting to the point where it's more involved, because now it's hitting Russia proper. So the United States may be blinking, but they should be blinking, because what the problem here is that there's this hubris. This hubris started with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the encroachment of NATO. But you can just roll back the tape. You look at when we won Desert Storm in Iraq, all right? If you look at those generals when they got up on stage to announce the end of operations, and how devastating it was, and how the United States won so quickly, you look at those generals, they had a hubris. They looked joyful and they had hubris, right? This was the beginnings of this erosion of multipolar world or bipolar world into a unipolar world, where the United States just felt like it could do whatever it wanted without anyone pushing back, because Russia Soviet Union was gone. The Soviet Union didn't have the power to push back. Now China started to gain, and now we have this kind of like bipolar power that's going on the international stage, where China is checking the power of the United States. Now the United States, when it was a unipolar power, all right, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the destruction of Iraq in Desert Storm, has not managed its hegemony well at all. It had IMF and World Bank austerity plans that basically gutted nations and made them indebted to the Western world during this time period, during the Clinton administration. Stiglitz talks about this in his writings, Professor Stiglitz. And we just didn't manage our unipolar power well. And through IDF into China, direct foreign investment into China from the United States, building up its supply chains to bring in cheap goods, only built up China, gave them the resources to build up, the know-how to build up. Now, the Chinese worked hard to get there, but it was US dollars, it was the United States financing and the United States importing of those goods that built up China. And now China is on the world stage, building up its military and checking the hegemony of the United States. So we're playing with fire here. This is why everyone's saying that this is not just a Russian-Ukraine issue. This is a United States. This is a long shadow of the United States hubris from the fall of the Soviet Union. And we need to really keep that in mind here, that this is 30 years in the making.
To be revisited unless Russia changes the way they've been fighting this war and with the extreme bombardment of many places in Ukraine, which has increased recently. So at the UN meeting, I think if you can get a number of other countries involved, not just the United Kingdom, then you will see Biden change his mind. And basically, I think that he has shown an incredible amount of patience. He didn't cave in right away, despite what the New York Times said the day before. But if he goes to the UN, then he can say, well, we talked about it, I considered it, and now the world community says we need to do it because this war is dragging on and on. And don't forget, Russia is also represented at the United Nations, and they can complain about it there. But the fact of the matter is, I think that's the direction that we're going to go. Because unless we do this, this war is going to drag on forever. They'll continue to have casualties on both sides. But this could be a game changer to get Russia to come to the negotiating table.
Okay, well, I want to go to Marina on that point. Could it be a game changer? Because apparently there are some in the US administration, like the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who said it won't really make much of a difference because these missiles will not turn the tide of the war because the Russians have moved lots of their attack assets and air bases beyond the range of these missiles, and there aren't that many of them. The stockpiles are running low. What do you make of those arguments?
Well, I think those are very valid points when it comes to the amount of missiles that are available in the US inventory, and even if we're talking about Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles. So that's the first thing. The second thing is one type of missiles is air-launched. The other one is launched from the likes of HIMARS, right? So we cannot compare apples and pears here, but for a moment, let's assume the Ukrainians would get the permission to use Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles. They would have to utilize F-16, so they would have had to train for these specific missions in order to be able to use them. Second is there are Russian ground-based air defenses to which these jets are susceptible. But even if we take away the Russian ground-based air defenses and electronic warfare, because Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles, they have triple navigation, but they still rely on GPS. That aside, if Ukraine can strike targets such as a Kursk airfield, is it going to make a difference? And this is a crucial point. If we look at the military history of deep strikes, what has to follow? A ground maneuver. And is Ukraine going to follow up with a ground maneuver? Does it have the capability? And the answer is no, because we have seen that the Ukrainian armed forces were not able to muster it during the last year's counteroffensive. And it's a very difficult task to master. So those isolated deep strikes with a limited number of missiles that Ukraine has might do some damage. But in military terms, they're not going to change the situation, and they're not going to make Russia give up its operation in the Donbass. It's not going to make the general staff withdraw the forces from Ukraine. So what it carries with it are extreme political risks, as we have discussed before, a lot of unknowns with little military value and high cost terms of US dollar costs.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all three of our guests today, Pavel Felgenhauer, Marina Miron, and Lawrence Korb. And thank you too for watching. If you didn't catch all of the program, don't worry, it's available for you to view anytime you want at aljazeera.com. Your views and suggestions are always welcome. Post them on our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or on X, where our handle is @AJ Inside Story. Until next time, from me, James Baez, and the team here in Doha, please stay safe. Bye-bye for now.
Paris is calling with French Bee.
Before we do Paris, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great deodorants that I have in my store. I have citrus, and I also have peppermint lavender tea tree. These are for males and females. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, all natural, has no aluminum, no baking soda in it, and it's a dual product. It's used as a deodorant, but it also will help to slowly detoxify your body. Really important to detoxify your body, get healthy, improve your endocrine system, improve your immune system. So please go to my store, get a couple bars of these very high quality deodorants. You can get it in citrus or peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. Very high quality deodorants. They're for males and females. Get a couple bars for your household. Omega-3 is very important to improve your cardiovascular health. They'll bring down LDL levels, increase your HDL levels. That helps to control your cholesterol. In addition, omega-3 helps to prevent red blood cells from sticking. So if you're worried about clotting issues, especially in the post-2020 crisis, it's really important to take omega-3, all right? So please go to the store, improve your cardiovascular health by taking omega-3. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. I also have structural nanosilver gel, really important, especially during the cold season. Put it on your hands, they'll stay active for 5 hours. You can put it around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, and you'll be neutralizing pathogens and you're creating a barrier so it's harder for a pathogen to get in and infect your body. So it's very important. It's a dual purpose product because if you apply this on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, it will heal quicker. Why? Because you are keeping the wound clean, and by doing that and creating this barrier with the gel, it creates an environment that allows it to heal about 1/3 of the time. In addition, you can apply it on your skin as a daily skincare routine. And what you'll notice, especially if you put it on your skin at night and then exfoliate in the morning, you'll notice that your skin is clearer and tighter. So you can use it as part of your skincare routine. So it's a dual purpose product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use this, especially in the cold season. You're going to need this because this cold season is going to be problematic. What I've been noticing in New York, and some of the followers that have been reaching out and telling me this, they are contracting SARS-CoV-2. All right, there are people, so there's an uptake in infectivity, in the infection of SARS-CoV-2 in the United States. All right, it's the surveillance in wastewater, it's ticked up, and individuals are getting symptoms. Now, some people are asymptomatic and they're just testing positive, but many, at least in New York that I've noticed, many are showing the manifestations of, let's say, a mild cold. And it will clear in about 5 to 6 days, but then it lingers. There's a lingering. This is a problem. This is why I keep on saying, during this cold season, because you're going to be exposed to influenza, RSV, Mpox potentially, and SARS-CoV-2, and maybe some other pathogens, bacterial infections, and other other viruses like adenovirus. But you're going to be exposed to a lot of stuff, and your immune system is weakened. So if you have something that's lingering, let's say a SARS-CoV-2 infection that's been lingering, then you're more susceptible to some of these other pathogens, right? Because you have a weakened immune system. In addition, like I said, the S1 subunit will attach to the TCR of a CD4 positive cell and prevent proper activation with the MHC2 class of an infected cell. So what that means is that S1 subunit from the virus is producing a lot of cytokines by touching the TCR, the T cell receptor of the CD4 positives, secreting cytokines, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and creating an inflammatory response. That inflammatory response signals to IgG4s to upregulate, all right? And those IgG4s are trying to downregulate this response. but because you have inactive or less active CD4, your active CD4 count is lower because of this binding of S1. And you have an upregulation of IgG4 that's trying to downregulate your immune system. It causes havoc. So this is what I mean, it trashes your immune system. So inoculations are trashing the immune system, but further exposure to the natural pathogen is also trashing the immune system because of this dynamic between S1 creating less active CD4 positives and upregulating IgG4s. And so their immune system isn't working as well. All right. So this chronic lingering effect, all right, is a problem. So what happens with some of these patients that are having these, they'll get the SARS-CoV-2, they're feeling upper respiratory problems, irritation, coughing, gets into their lung, all right, but it clears, they get better, but then it kind of comes back, it kind of lingers. And I was saying this a long time ago, that when you clear the infection, that for many people, that those viral particles can embed itself in the adipose tissue, in your colon tissue, all right? It can embed itself in the liver. It can embed itself in the kidney. So it can hide, it can find these reservoirs. And in some of the research, it was showing that these viral particles, the SARS-CoV-2, hides in these, there are different types of macrophages. There's M0, M1s, M2s, okay? So they hide in M0s and waiting for some sort of reactivation. So there's a reservoir, even though you test negative on antigen, test negative on with the PCR, you could have a reservoir that's reactivated. Now, over time, let's say you don't get SARS-CoV-2 for many years and you're losing weight and you keep your inflammation down so you're not reactivating M0 macrophages. What will happen is that you're slowly clearing it out. But there may have some remaining that's dormant. Maybe it's dormant for multiple years. We don't know. But the thing is that there seems to be a reservoir that gets to be reactivated because of this kind of like inflammatory response that's going on, this interplay that's going on with CD4s that aren't fully activated, and this fluctuation of the IgG4s. So the thought process here is try not to get any more inoculations to perturb the immune system. Let the immune system heal. But also try not to get SARS-CoV-2 natural infection, because what it's happening is it seems like it's resetting this immune system issue as your body is trying, as you stay away from getting infected or staying away from getting inoculated, your body slowly is trying to heal. But then all of a sudden you get inoculated, then your immune system gets back into this chaotic problem with this activation of CD4s and these IgG4s, okay? The upregulation of IgG4s. If you get the infection, it's also creating an issue here, all right? So it's not happening to everybody. Some people are asymptomatic, all right? But they're testing positive. But many of the people that I have noticed in the New York area, they're getting lingering issues after they clear it. So they get SARS-CoV-2, they're testing positive, they're testing positive on the antigen, they're testing positive on the PCR, all right? And they also have some sort of an immune response, right, to it. So their IgMs there's an uptake in their IgMs. And so you have an uptake in IgMs, you are testing positive on the on the antigen test and you're testing positive on the PCR, they clear the infection after about 7 days or so. But then all of a sudden it kind of comes back, 4 days later, 5 days later. All right, it lingers. There's a lingering. There's a double hit. Now, if you remember, back in the early days, there were people talking about a double hit infection in December in the United States, and people just thought it was some sort of the common cold or whatever. Many people had it across the country, all right, especially in New York. And there was a lingering. You had a cold that was kind of really bad, and then all of a sudden, about a week later, you clear it. A week later, it comes back, and it's a little bit worse. And it's deeper in the lung. It was harder to get rid of. It was almost like a 2-3 week to get rid of. Many people back in December or late November had this issue. This is kind of like that. All right, it lingers. Now, some of the data points are suggesting it's involving these macrophages, these M0 macrophage reservoir, these different tissues that the virus could be hiding in, and it just gets reactivated, right? And the issue with the adipose tissue. So the key here is keep the inflammation down, so you're improving your immune system, and you're bringing down those pro-inflammatory cytokines that are being pumped out of those CD4 positive, being activated by the S1 subunit. But you're also trying to keep it down so you're not telling the body to upregulate and keep the memory cells for the IgG4s. You want those down. You want those down and kind of try to clear it. That takes years to clear. But if you get infected or an inoculation, then it moves everything back up, and you need more time to clear it. So the best thing is not to catch SARS-CoV-2 and not to get inoculated, to reset your immune system. Okay? Now, I'm the most comprehensive person to tell you this. I'm telling you how to keep healthy. All right? You need to take stuff that helps to neutralize pathogens. Those are the structural nanosilvers. You need to reduce the reactive oxygen species. So you have to reduce those reactive oxygen species, those free radicals, by taking C60. All right. You soak those up. And so the health of those cells are better. It's not stressed. The mitochondria health will improve and have more energy for your immune system. Really important. And you're bringing down those pro-inflammatory cytokines with the turmeric and the ashwagandha. So it's the structural nanosilver gels and liquids, C60, turmeric, and ashwagandha. All right. Then you take the lignans for boosting up your immune system. You take the omega-3s to make sure that you don't get the stickiness of the red blood cells. You take the nattokinase to prevent the blood clotting. You take the magnesium and zinc to help boost up your immune system. And when you do these things, then you're going to start seeing, okay, you can't 100% prevent getting infected. But at least if you do, you're trying to calm down that immune system so you don't have this kind of positive feedback loop that's happening to bring back up your IgG4s and cause this problem with the partial activation of the CD4. Because remember, S1 causes a partial activation of CD4, excreting cytokines, but prevents it from actually attaching to the MHC2 of the infected cell. And when that does that, it's not clearing the infection as well. All right, so you want to just calm the immune system down. It's really important that people understand this. All right, and you will fare much better. Now, there's no one that can prevent 100% getting SARS-CoV-2. It's impossible. All right. And most likely everyone will get it eventually, all right, if someone hasn't already. Most of the United States has gotten SARS-CoV-2, either asymptomatic or if you get a test, most likely you have antibodies for SARS-CoV-2, all right? So most people have been infected by SARS-CoV-2 in the United States. There are some people that have not, all right? But over time, because this is endemic, it's gonna cycle, and you may get it, once every other year, or once every year, or maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And when it's repeated on a regular time frame, it's going to perturb your immune system, and it's going to weaken it. It's going to weaken it, even with the natural infection, because of what's going on with the CD4s and what's going on with the IgG4s. All right, so calm the immune system. By calming the immune system, you're going to fare much better. So that's why it's so important to take the C60 in the coconut oil, C60 in the extra virgin olive oil, or C60 in avocado oil. The avocado oil, the coconut oil, or the extra virgin olive oil, C60, is in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. And what it does is it just soaks up those free radicals. By soaking up those free radicals, you're going to do less damage to your cells, because free radicals cause damage to your cell, and you're going to have better health of your mitochondria, to have higher ATP, really important for your immune system and just cellular processes. So your tissues are healthier. So you slow down the aging process. And by having less free radicals, your immune system is going to perform better. So this is synergistic with stuff like resveratrol or clarity factor or ubiquinol, that are going to try to boost up the health of the cell. So go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. It soaks up free radicals. It's very potent. You take a teaspoon of it a day. All right? It's really important. Take a teaspoon of it a day, soak up those free radicals, and boost up your immune system. With that said, let's go to Times News again.
In comfort, on board our next
Times Radio.
generation A350. No heat, no crowd, no problem.
And what we've seen over the last 20 years is Putin threatening literally everybody. Don't forget, it was about 15 years ago, he threatened to use nuclear weapons against Denmark over some dispute. I mean, this is a guy who constantly makes the most outlandish threats in order to dissuade people from defending themselves. We need to stand with the Ukrainian people and demonstrate we're serious about it.
The Conservative leadership race continues, and it's a big couple of weeks as the remaining 4 contenders make their pitches to the party conference. The front-runner, Robert Jenrick, is calling for the contest to be sped up. So do the others agree? Tom Tugendhat, who's also in the running, and also the former security minister in government, now the shadow, joins us on the programme. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I thought you were on a motorbike then. It sounds like you are. Well, thank you. Thanks for being with us.
I'm not allowed to ride motorbikes. I don't kid, my wife told me.
Well, exceptional timing from whoever is riding one noisily behind you. Robert Jenrick is calling for a shortened contest in this Tory leadership race and a TV debate, an interesting proposition, if you like. Do you agree with him?
Well, look, I've done TV debates for leadership things, and I'm very happy to do whatever is arranged by the party, because I think this is one of those moments where we've got to make sure we give the British people, and of course the Conservative membership, the opportunity to somebody who's going to serve the country, who's going to lead not just the party, but be ready to lead the country and to act in the national interest. And, focusing on service and focusing on other people is exactly what this is about, particularly when we're seeing Keir Starmer has turned from service to self-service.
Do you think you've got it in you to win? I mean, you're trailing the pack at the moment. Do you think you can turn it around?
Not really. No, I'm not trailing the pack. I'm equal with James, and I'm gaining momentum. So absolutely, I can win. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing with a real choice being put to Conservative members of different people, with all of whom are friends of mine, all of whom are offering a slightly different emphasis. But one of us has actually demonstrated consistently through polling and through the ability to call things out that I'm consistently ahead of the curve, whether that's on calling out China or Russia or Iran, whether it's about voting against vaccine passports, or in fact voting or not supporting the national insurance rise, which later became government policy. Consistently ahead and consistently demonstrating that I'm able to change the conversation and bring people alongside.
You say that you're gaining momentum. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I was, as you rightly say, 4th, and now I'm 3rd, so that's gaining momentum.
Okay, and have you added some new names to your list in the last couple of days?
I have, and this is you know how this process works. got a bunch of people telling me how and when they want to go public, and it'll be up to them to decide how they want to make their decision.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that for conference. Of course, a big moment for all of you to make your pitch at Tory conference. We will be there with this show. You're very welcome to join us there if you've got the time, Tom Tugendhat. You were, though, the security minister. You're now the shadow. One of the biggest issues today is Ukraine. We were asking the government earlier about whether or not the UK should go alone on Storm Shadow missiles. Do you think that would be a good move?
Look, I think the right thing to do is to support the Ukrainians in defending themselves and allowing them to use the ammunition that we've agreed to give them to do that, whether that's striking positions that are where the Russian troops are mobilizing and preparing themselves to attack and murder Ukrainian citizens. I think that's a very simple decision, actually, and I think it's a very clear one. We are seeing rockets and missiles fired within Russia, killing Ukrainian civilians. We need to make sure the Ukrainians are able to defend themselves, and that's why I support their ability to use these weapon systems.
So is the Prime Minister emboldening President Putin by not saying yes?
No, look, you stand up to bullies, you don't kowtow to them. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is Putin threatening literally everybody. Don't forget, it was about 15 years ago, he threatened to use nuclear weapons against dead.
Yeah, but why did Blinken blink?
Over some dispute. I mean, this is a guy who constantly makes the most outlandish threats in order to dissuade people from defending themselves. We need to stand with the Ukrainian people and demonstrate we're serious about this. You know, whether it's about people trafficking through Minsk into the European Union or through Libya into southern Italy, we have seen Putin weaponizing literally everything he possibly can to use against us. We need to stand up against him. That's why one of the first things I did when I took over as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee was call out Russian dirty money in our system and to try and end the sleaze that we've seen far too much of, not just in politics, but actually across the United Kingdom. We need to end it, and that's why I'm standing.
So can you explain to us, because you have got a unique perspective on this, you've read those security briefings that very, very few people will ever be able to read. And Labour are obviously, you know, they're now in government. They can't really come on and explain exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe you can. Why does it look like Keir Starmer is hesitating? Why does it look like we're holding back when what we hear behind the scenes is the UK wants this to happen? What's really going on?
You're watching YouTube, but did you know there's a YouTube music app where you can listen to rare covers of your favorite artists? Duh.
Yeah, you. What's really going on?
Well, look, this is a political decision. I'm not going to talk about the secrets or the briefings that I got. I promised I'd keep the King's secrets, and I will. But what you're really seeing here is a vacillation over leadership. You're seeing a failure to make clear the commitment that the British people should have of standing up for freedom, standing up for our own interests and protecting ourselves by supporting our allies. And let me be absolutely clear that as leader of the Conservative Party, I am standing to be Prime Minister because I want to return this government to the service of the British people and offer them leadership in defending ourselves at home and abroad to make sure that we are always acting in the national interest. I'm afraid what we're seeing from Sir Keir Starmer is vacillation and self-service, not leadership.
As you hear these news clips, you may be having heart issues because you're afraid of having a heart attack from all the stress that's going on in the world. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and improve your heart health. How do you do that? You can take this new supplement that I have on my store, nattokinase. Nattokinase is a dual purpose product, all right? It helps to break up clots. It's fibrinolytic. And it also will help to bring down cholesterol. It'll bring down the LDL levels and increase your HDL levels when you take nattokinase at higher doses. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take nattokinase. People that are in the whole anti-aging and longevity subculture take nattokinase every day to improve their cardiovascular health. Well, you should also do that. Take a lesson learned. It's synergistic with other things like omega-3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the nattokinase. NAD+ is important to take on a regular basis to improve your energy levels. It helps to repair DNA damage, and it will also help with neural protection, neural health, all right? So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the NAD+. Again, it helps to increase your energy levels. It helps to improve the repair mechanism for damaged DNA. Because as we get older, we have DNA damage that needs help. So taking NAD+ will help to repair that DNA damage. We're being bombarded by chemicals and toxins, so that causes DNA damage. Pathogens cause DNA damage. So taking NAD+ is going to be important to help to repair that DNA damage. And as we get older, we need better neural health and neuroprotection. So taking NAD+ is an important supplement for that. So please go to the store and take NAD+. I take it every day. So, and it's synergistic with some of the other things that I've been saying to take, you know, such as ubiquinol and resveratrol and the C60, you know, because by improving that energy level, right, and helping with the repair of your cells, you're going to slow down the aging process, and you're going to help to boost up your immune system. So please go to the store and get the NAD+.
Tom Tugendhat, who is, of course, running to be the Conservative leader. Thank you very much for joining us. Keir Starmer found himself in a war of words with Vladimir Putin at the end of the week after a blink-and-you'll-miss-it trip to Washington. Ukraine was top of the agenda, specifically President Zelensky's urgent request to use British long-range missiles to attack Russian territory. Well, Nick Thomas-Symonds is Paymaster General and a Cabinet Office Minister and joins us on the programme now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate. Good to join you.
Thanks for being with us. Let's start with Ukraine, shall we? Because there are calls from former defence secretaries to go it alone and approve Storm Shadow for wider use. Can we, as the UK, do that? And will the government do that?
Look, I'm not going to comment, first of all, on operational matters like that. I think having an open debate about it only really benefits Vladimir Putin. What I would say is that already this government is providing substantial support to Ukraine. On coming to office, we confirmed the £3 billion a year, and that will continue annually for as long as it takes. We've also announced in recent weeks an additional 650 air defence missiles. When President Zelensky has requested additional artillery shells, we've again made arrangements so that that can be ramped up as well. And I think that if you look at wars, you look at conflicts, they're not won by a single weapon, a single system. What's important here is that we do continue to make clear we will back Ukraine for as long as it takes.
So can I take from what you've just said there, and I know that you're saying you don't want to have the full discussion in the open. I think people will probably understand that. But what you've said in answer is that when Ukraine has asked for things, we have given them. Should we hear what you're saying as an indication that the UK has not given up and that we may well see some movement on Storm Shadows in the weeks to come?
Look, as I say, I'm afraid I can't discuss that operational issue. This on Storm Shadows, this has been a quite long-standing request from President Zelensky. It goes back over a year. I think what you have seen in recent days is the Foreign Secretary and Tony Blinken jointly showing solidarity, visiting Kyiv, and also speaking to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government as to what their needs are.
Well, they've made clear what their needs are. I mean, President Zelensky has said very clearly he's disappointed that there was no agreement in Washington. What's our message to him now? Is it, just hold on?
Well, our message is we will continue to stand by him and stand by Ukraine. That's why we've continued, as I say.
But can you say that we're doing that? If you've just said to me in one breath, we listen to what they ask for and we grant their requests. You've heard President Zelensky, he's asking you for help and we're not giving it. Are you asking him to just hold on and be patient?
No, what I'm asking him to do, and indeed what the government is doing, is continuing with a dialogue, and that dialogue is one that we supported the previous government in conducting. That's why there's always been a bipartisan position on this, which I think is hugely important. We will continue that dialogue. But as we are talking in this interview, Kate, we are already, as I say, supplying the air defence missiles. We're ramping up the supply in terms of artillery shells, which has been requested as well. We continue to support in terms of money, continue to support in terms of training. So we will continue that support in a wide range of areas. And to the trip to the United States by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, this is really important as well, that the United States, incredibly close ally, the special relationship we have with the United States, whether it's about Ukraine, the Middle East, China, it's really crucial that we continue that close dialogue with the United States. That's precisely what the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary have been doing.
Yeah, and there are reports this morning that the US, and you know, we are aware of them, that the US is the block here in terms of approving those Storm Shadow missiles. Is the other concern about nuclear fears? Because we've had some saber rattling from the Russians. You know, there's potential for nuclear weapons. We know that Russia has been sharing nuclear secrets with Iran, for example. How concerned is the government about that?
Well, I have to say that I think Putin is just trying to throw dust in the air here to obscure the fact that he bears 100% responsibility for this war through unprovoked and illegal aggression. And
so is he faking it? Is he faking it?
His threats are nothing new, are they? He warned us not to send tanks to Ukraine. We sent them. He warned us not to send missiles to Ukraine. We sent them. This isn't the first time that he's threatened to use tactical.
He's right about that statement, but how do we know that they haven't pushed him to the edge where he's now going to use them? We're playing with fire. That's the big problem here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Click the link in the description to get to the website. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin K2. This is an MK7 molecule. What that means is that it will help with bone health and cardiovascular health. I have done many videos on how to do that. You should be taking vitamin K2. It's synergistic with D3. Should be taken with turmeric and ashwagandha and C60 and nattokinase and omega-3, right? And C60 to improve your cardiovascular health. But to help with your bone health, you take vitamin K2, MK7, with D3 and do light resistance training, do regular exercising, regular stretching, and I recommend drinking milk. Some people don't like drinking milk, especially when they get older, but taking some sort of calcium supplement. But it's really important to help with your bone health and your cardiovascular health. So take the vitamin K2, MK7. So this is a dual purpose vitamin. NAC, really important. Why? Because it brings up glutathione levels. Higher glutathione levels will help to work as an antioxidant and bring down those reactive oxygen species. NAC also helps to detoxify the body, and it also helps with mental health. It helps to control the mental mood. So it helps to mitigate some of the problems that you may see with people that have ADHD or concentration issues. So NAC is important to take on a regular basis. Now, the ones that are coming from the subculture, from anti-aging or the longevity subculture, they take NAC because it's another pathway as an antioxidant. By raising up your glutathione levels, it's soaking up those free radicals on a different pathway. So it's synergistic with C60. In addition, it helps to detoxify your body. So please go to the store, take NAC. I take NAC every day as an additional pathway to soak up free radicals. Free radicals are a major important pillar. Soaking up those free radicals is a major pillar for improving your immune system and slowing down the aging process.
What happens? The reality is he is a bully. His imperialist fantasies have killed or wounded over 600,000 of his own soldiers and frankly brought shame on his country. So no, the government will not be intimidated by Putin or his bluster.
What's the long-term plan here, finally? Are we pushing, because it feels to me like this conversation is coming to a head on all sides. Are we pushing for a deal on paper to end this war? Is that something we're talking to Ukraine about now?
No, we are saying to Ukraine that we will be with them for as long as it takes. And this kind of debate, it is about Ukraine. It's about Ukraine and its own destiny, not some sort of construct being pushed from outside. And our message to Ukraine, which has been communicated when we were in opposition and indeed in government, is that we will stand alongside Ukraine for as long as it takes. We can't have a situation in the 21st century's international order where you have one country invading the sovereign territory of another
But
country.
forgive me, Nick Thomas, that wasn't my question. My question was about, will this end in an agreement? And if it does, some say that Ukraine will have to compromise and cede some territory. Would the UK accept that? Is that a good position for Ukraine to be put in?
It's a matter for Ukraine, is the point I'm making to you, Kate, that it has to be for President Zelensky and indeed the Ukrainian people to deal with those sorts of questions. The last thing we would want, as has happened in previous conflicts of the past, is some sort of imposed settlement from outside. It is a matter for President Zelensky as leader of the Ukrainian people, but we will continue to support them for as long as it takes.
More broadly, the Prime Minister is heading to Italy. He's heading there today. We know that part of the conversation will be around Storm Shadow. I don't want to get into that again. But the other part of the conversation with Italy, with Giorgia Meloni, will be about immigration. There are incredibly sad reports that there are a number of dead people in the Channel this morning. They're trying to cross the Channel to arrive here in the UK, likely in small boats. Is the UK considering processing migrants, like Italy does in Albania, offshore?
Well, firstly, can I just say once again the awful loss of life that we've seen in the English Channel overnight, and it only underlines the urgency, the imperative to take action on this. That is why the government has already started the process of recruiting the Border Security Commander to bring together all those different agencies that are working in this space, from Crown Prosecution Service International to Border Force to police to intelligence agencies, working with Europol and international partners to bust this vile trade of criminal smuggling.
And will considering processing migrants in Albania be part of that plan?
No, I mean that's the Italian scheme. It's just a very different type of scheme to the.
It's kind of interesting on how this whole illegal immigration push in Europe and in the United States is happening at the same time. So it's not just idiosyncratic to just the United States and some sort of political play by the Democratic Party, but it seems as though that there are uber forces that are in play here that are trying to weaken Western civilization. Right? So this is an important feature, that the illegal immigration that is taking place in the United States is not just a United States problem. It is a Western culture problem. It's a United States problem. It's a European problem. And it seems as though there is a push by some sort of uber force. Who that uber force is or forces, I don't really know. I have some guesses, but I don't know for sure. But the thing is that it's happening at the same time. That makes it seem as though it's coordinated. And if it's coordinated, then you can extrapolate that it's trying to weaken some of its institutions. Now, in the United States, that would be weakening the economy, that would be weakening its constitutional freedoms, that would be pushing towards socialism, and maybe the same thing is happening in the UK and in other countries in Europe, like even Germany. Germany has this issue. France has this issue.
Rwanda scheme that the previous government had and wasted over £700 million on, but it's a broader point about a recognition that irregular migration is a continent-wide challenge.
Yeah.
And Italy obviously has had particular issues in terms of people crossing the Mediterranean.
So would we
rather like we have our relationship, our agreement with France, Italy has in place, for example, agreements with places like Tunisia, Libya, what's Italy doing in terms of its upstream work, in terms of the Balkans, and the Balkans is, of course, one of the, I'm afraid to say, people smuggling routes that's regularly used. So it's a broader point about what discussions we can have to, of course, learning from each other, but crucially, how we can have this discussion about being a continental-wide challenge, because people who come through those routes across Europe are the people who are ending up in the English Channel.
Yeah.
That's why it's our interesting.
Okay, so I take from that we may well consider it. It might be part of those discussions with Italy over the next couple of days. There's one more story that I want to ask you about today, which is the allegations that Keir Starmer didn't declare clothes given to his wife. Why is his wife accepting free clothes in the first place?
Well, some countries have a particular budget, don't they, for their leaders and their spouses to be able to look their best when they're representing the country. They have that in the United States, for example, for the president and the first lady. And we, whatever your political persuasion, our elected prime minister and spouse do represent us on the international stage. And of course, we all want them to look at their best. In respect of the declaration, when the prime minister took office, advice was taken as to what was appropriate and needed to be declared. There was then some doubt about that, and further advice was sought in recent weeks. That's why we see the stories we do today. But the Prime Minister is someone who has twice sought out advice. He's being transparent, seeking guidance as to what was appropriate to do. You'd hardly call this hiding something.
Doesn't it look a bit strange, though? I mean, let's be honest here. The Prime Minister's pretty well off. It's a well-paid job. He's getting free glasses. It just feels a bit wrong.
Well, it's something that happens in other countries.
I'm not asking you, forgive me, Nick Thompson, I'm not asking you about other countries. I'm asking you directly. Do you think it's okay for the Prime Minister, who is incredibly well paid, to get free glasses?
It is permissible for him to do this. There's no suggestion that this is something that's somehow inappropriate.
I know it's permissible. I'm asking you, do you think it feels all right? Because other people think it looks a bit weird.
No, I do want the Prime Minister and Lady Victoria to look at their best on the world stage when they're representing us. And just as other countries give support for their leaders to look at their best, I have no issue with the Prime Minister and Victoria looking at their.
This is why the world is going straight to hell, is you have politicians that are focused on what glasses that they're wearing or what tie they're wearing, instead of solving the issues of the day. We are literally either in World War III or we are just about to be in World War III. All right? And we're worried about this guy's glasses. This is small potatoes.
On the world stage, and he is somebody who has twice here sought out what was the appropriate declaration to make. It's actually seeking transparency rather than the other way around.
You keep saying that they should look their best, and that's not really the point. The point is where the money comes from. The point is where the free clothes come from. The point is who is donating them. Do you think it might be a bit better, a bit more above board, if we set a budget for this?
Well, no, because then you get into a debate, don't you, as you often do with the funding of political parties, as to whether you do it by the state. And I think you would have legitimate questions then, or whether it should be the taxpayer funding this. But what's happened here is we've had, and again, it's all about board. The donation is declared. Lord Ali has been a long-standing donator to the Labour Party, has done it over a number of different leaders, not simply Keir Starmer, and has been a member of the House of Lords since 1998. He's someone who's given over a quarter of a century of public service.
Nick Thomas Simmons, K-Master General, thank you for giving us your time this morning.
Okay, you as we've been saying.
It's amazing. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. And get the ubiquinol. It's the active form for CoQ10. This is very important to take every day. This is taking a lesson learned from the whole longevity and anti-aging crowd, how to improve your body's health and to mitigate, the cold season, all this stuff. How does it work? Ubiquinol is an antioxidant. So we've talked about that. This is synergistic with C60. You want to bring down those free radicals. it helps to boost up your energy, and it improves your neural health. So this is going to, as we get older, and as people have gone through the 2020 aftershock, all right, some people are having problems with their neurons. Some people are having cognitive function issues. Some people are having balancing issues. Some people are having sympathetic issues, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system issues. So you got to keep the neurons healthy, all right? In the post-2020 crisis, and not just that, as we get older, it's really important to maintain that. And proper supplementation, proper diet, exercise, stretching, balancing, those will all improve your neurons and muscle coordination, balancing. But then you also need to challenge your brain by reading and writing and talking to real people, all right? By doing that, you're holistically healing the body, holistically improving the functions of your body and slowing down the aging process. But in terms of supplementation, ubiquinol is really important to improve cellular function and slowing down the aging process. So ubiquinol, again, is the active form for CoQ10. It improves your neural health. It's an antioxidant. And it helps to boost up energy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Follow my advice. I take ubiquinol every day. So I've been taking ubiquinol for a long time. All right, but now I finally can provide it on my store for you to add it to this whole stacking that I've been telling you what to do. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol. It's a very high quality product. I take ubiquinol every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of the transmission. Please ask your social media to follow me. Share the links. I need to reach a larger audience so I can tell people how to navigate through the tumultuous times with finance, how to navigate through these geopolitical events and understand what's going on, because geopolitics affects the economics, and also how to improve your health and how to navigate through, especially this next cold season. This next cold season will be problematic. So please take my advice. Get those supplements that I said that to neutralize pathogens. That's structural nanosilver liquids and gels. Bring down the inflammation, turmeric and ashwagandha. Bring down those free radicals by taking ubiquinol and C60. All right. When you're doing these things, you're going to improve your body to be able to go get through the cold season. This cold season is going to be problematic. In addition, make sure that you get the lozenges. So the moment you get that irritation in your throat, you want to neutralize it with those lozenges and drops that I offer that are structural nanosilver. So that's the cherry drops, lemon, honey and a lemon, or cherry drops. And the lozenges are in manuka honey and in elderberry zinc. Get a couple bags for your household. You're going to need them during the cold season. This cold season will be problematic. And if you get SARS-CoV-2, the chances of it having some sort of rebound, some sort of lingering effect, is drastically higher this year. So pay attention. I've given you everything you need to know. Thank you for listening. Please ask your social media to follow me. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.